Hey there, welcome to This Explainer. Okay, if you've recently stepped into a management role, or honestly, even if you've been leading a team for a while now, consider this your direct, tough love coaching session. We're going to dive deep into the uncomfortable realities of being a boss, because, let's face it, ducking hard conversations is quite literally the most expensive habit you can pick up as a manager. So, my goal today is to help you truly understand what being a manager is actually all about and to make these confrontations a normal part of your job, not just some terrifying exception you try to avoid.
Section 1. The Outsourcing Email Trap.
Okay, let's dive into this. There's this trap that almost every new manager falls right into. It's this very specific kind of email that new managers learn to write, like almost the second they get their promotion. It starts out super polite, laying out a really tricky issue. Maybe it's about pay, a sudden dip in performance, or some brewing conflict between two team members. And then it neatly wraps up with some version of this exact quote. "I'd love your thoughts on how to handle this." And you send it right off to your own boss. Now, what's really fascinating here is just how deceptive this is. It looks so responsible, right? It feels like you're actively seeking guidance and being a good team player. But in reality, it is something entirely different.
Here is the blunt, unfiltered translation of that polite little email. You are trying to outsource a conversation you simply do not want to have. And look, as a coach, I get it. I really do. Most of us just aren't raised to enjoy disagreement, are we? Throughout our lives and early careers, we're totally conditioned to be liked, to keep the peace, and to actively avoid being the person who upsets everyone else. But then, boom, often without much warning at all, you become a manager. And the job quietly transforms into this endless sequence of conversations that have a very real chance of making someone unhappy with you. You have got to consciously flip that switch in your head, because if you don't, well, the cost of not flipping it is going to fall incredibly heavily on your team, your decisions, and ultimately, your own career.
Section 2. The Arbitrator's Chair. So you have to really internalize the core difference between who you were yesterday and who you are today. When you were an individual contributor, you were evaluated purely on your direct output, the skills that made you a star player, all about what you could produce. But now, as a manager, your achievements are strictly the sum of other people's achievements. And there's this massive shift that most new managers just completely underestimate. A really meaningful chunk of your day is now going to be spent acting as an arbitrator, resolving conflict and making those tough calls. It isn't an interruption of your real job. Actually, it is the job.
Your team members are going to come to you with requests of absolutely every size. It could be super mundane, like swapping a holiday shift, or highly consequential, like asking for a big pay raise or complaining about a colleague. By the law of averages alone, you're going to sit in that arbitrator's chair and say no a lot. You will literally have to say no to people you genuinely like, people who genuinely deserve a yes, but whom you just cannot accommodate right now. Uneven workloads, missed deadlines, two people who suddenly just can't share a project, or a former peer who keeps testing boundaries now that you're their boss. The triggers are endless. And as your coach today, I need you to hear this loud and clear. This is not some rare edge case. You have to be ready to address every single one of these.
Section 3. The Real Cost of Avoidance.
So, what actually happens when we refuse to sit in that chair? Well, the natural instinct when one of these uncomfortable moments lands on your desk is to just defer it. You think to yourself, you know what, I'll push it to next week, or I'll wait until after the team offsite, or maybe the situation will just magically resolve itself. Spoiler alert, it almost never does. Let this incredibly powerful idiom sink in for a second. Hard conversations don't decompose with time, they compost, right? When you ignore an issue, it doesn't just fade away into nothing. It ferments. It rots quietly right under the surface, and to what was originally a totally manageable issue becomes incredibly toxic and ugly.
Let's actually trace how that composting process happens on a timeline. Say in week 1, you have a tiny concern about an underperforming employee, but you defer the conversation. By month 1, the rest of the team starts pulling back their own effort. Why? Because they're watching you and they can see exactly what level of mediocrity is being tolerated. Then, by quarter 1, because you didn't address the slack, your top talent gets frustrated and starts interviewing elsewhere. A perfectly manageable conversation at week 1 just snowballed into you losing your absolute best people by quarter 1. And none of this had to escalate. It only escalated because the conversation everyone knew needed to happen just didn't happen on time. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer asymmetry of avoidance. Think about it. The discomfort of sitting down and having that hard conversation, that lasts maybe an hour. Your pulse might race, it might feel super awkward, but hey, it's over in an hour.
But the damage of not having it, that lasts for quarters, sometimes even years. Skipping a hard conversation feels like the kind option in the moment. It feels like you're sparing someone's feelings. But over any meaningful time frame, it is almost always the cruelest option for your team and your overall culture.
Section 4. Respect over popularity.
This brings us to a massive psychological barrier that just stops managers in their tracks. Like, why is avoidance so incredibly tempting? It's because new managers aren't used to being disliked for a decision. Think back to when you were an individual contributor. If someone was unhappy with you, it was impersonal. A missed deadline, a bug in the code, easily fixed, right? Management is completely different. Now it's people you've worked right alongside walking out of your office feeling let down by you personally. And man, that stings. But the absolute worst thing you can do is conflate being liked with being effective. Popularity is a leaky bucket. You're constantly going to be trying to refill it by pleasing everyone, which, let's be real, is impossible. Respect, however, compounds over time. The absolute strongest teams are built by managers who say the uncomfortable thing first, kindly for sure, but without flinching.
Which leads us right to a specific tactic managers use to try and keep that popularity intact. It's called the escalation trap. This is when you pull your own manager into a conversation that is actually yours to have. You might frame it to yourself as looping them in for cover, or you might even subtly ask them to deliver the hard message themselves. Well, the source material warns strongly against this. When you do this, you are effectively announcing to your employee one of two things. Either you lack the authority to make decisions, or you have the authority but completely lack the courage to use it. Yikes, right? It destroys your credibility in both directions, downward to your team and upward to your boss. This is quite literally just avoidance dressed up as good process.
Now, as your coach, I'm not going to be naive about this. There are, of course, rare exceptions where escalating to your manager is exactly the right move. We're talking about anything involving suspected misconduct, serious legal exposure, or a decision that genuinely crosses your level of authority. You should also totally escalate if you sincerely want a second perspective before you act. But the test here is actually very simple. If you already know what the decision should be, and you're only routing it upward because you just don't want to look them in the eye and deliver it yourself, yeah, that is evasion.
Section 5. The one-sentence playbook.
All right, so we know we have to have these conversations. We know we absolutely can't outsource them. So how do we actually do it? Well, the fact that these conversations are unavoidable doesn't mean you have to walk into the room cold. The managers who handle confrontations best always do a couple of things before the meeting. Step 1, they write down one unambiguous sentence, just one. Step 2, they play the conversation forward in their head. They actively anticipate the pushback. What if the employee gets emotional? What if they ask a question you don't have a clean answer to? You don't need a full-blown script, but mentally rehearsing that difficult moment makes you vastly calmer, significantly kinder, and just so much more decisive.
So the crucial point here is captured in this really simple rule. If you cannot compress your message to a single unambiguous sentence, the message isn't ready. You need them to walk out of that room understanding that one core thing. If you try to soften the blow by bringing up 3 or 4 random points, or if you can't summarize it sharply, you're just going to meander your way through the meeting, and everyone's going to leave completely confused. Write the one sentence.
Now, being willing to have hard conversations does not mean you get to be blunt just for sport. The goal is to be clear, not cutting. You've got to separate the what from the how. The what, your actual message, must be direct, but the how, your delivery, must be respectful. Look at the brutal approach. It attacks character. You're unreliable. That just slams a door shut immediately. Now look at the direct approach. It focuses entirely on behavior and impact. When you miss deadlines, the team absorbs the slip. See the difference? This opens a door for actual coaching. Clear delivery of a hard message, paired with genuine respect, almost never reads as condescension.
Section 6. Steeling yourself for action. Let's bring all of this coaching together. Here's the hard truth directly from the source material. You don't get to opt out. A deeply meaningful part of being a manager is being willing to sit in the intense discomfort of a conversation that someone, somewhere, decided you should be the one to have. The absolute moment you start ducking, deferring, or outsourcing these chats, your team feels it. They feel it first as confusion, then as unfairness, and finally as a gradual but total loss of belief in you. But when you face them, you build trust. And not just with your team, but within yourself. Once you actually trust yourself to handle the hard things, honestly, half the dread just disappears.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative question. Which conversation have you been putting off this week? Come on, you know exactly which one it is. So, your challenge right now, as soon as this explainer ends, is to grab a piece of paper, write down the one unambiguous sentence you need to deliver, play out the branches in your head, and then go do the job. Lead with clarity, lead with warmth, and whatever you do, don't flinch. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and good luck out there.